Break contact. Multiple hostiles closing on the valley floor. Engage targets A1 through D1.
Copy that. Engaging.
Watch for movement near the smoke plume. Over.
Bravo 1, this is Overwatch. Adjust fire danger close. I repeat, danger close. Negative Overwatch. We are pinned, we can't move. Lieutenant Axelrod's voice is a jagged tear through the static, stripped of its usual arrogance. They're flanking left. We're done. Get out of there, Hernandez. That's an order. Mia Hernandez doesn't blink. Through the scope of her SR-25, the world is a wash of thermal grays and whites. She sees the RPG team setting up on the rooftop. She sees the SEALs huddled behind a crumbling sedan seconds away from being vaporized. Negative Bravo 1, I have the solution. Hernandez, you do not have PID on the spotter. If you take that shot, you're court-martialed. Do you hear me? You're a liability if you miss. Mia exhales her heartbeat, slowing to a rhythmic thud against the stock of her rifle. The wind is 12 miles per hour, full value left to right. Distance 1,200 meters, a shot she shouldn't make. A shot that will end her career if the JAG lawyers look too closely at the timestamps. You called me a burden, Lieutenant, she whispers, her finger tightening on the trigger. Let me carry it. Transmission breaks. The crack of a suppressed rifle splits the valley. 6 hours earlier, forward operating base, Anvil, Yemen border. The interior of the MH-60 Blackhawk smelled of hydraulic fluid, stale sweat, and the metallic tang of anxiety. It was a sensory cocktail Mia Hernandez had grown immune to after 3 deployments, but tonight the air felt heavier, thicker. She sat near the door gunner, her knees pulled tight to her chest to accommodate the length of the SR-25 rifle case wedged between her legs. Around her, the men of Bravo team were statues of kinetic potential, jigsaw puzzles of Kevlar ceramic plating and carbines. They were the sledgehammer. She was the scalpel. And the sledgehammer didn't like being told it needed help. 2 minutes to LZ, lights out. The crew chief screamed over the intercom, his voice battling the thumping roar of the rotors. Mia checked her optic one last time. Caps off. Dialed to 0. She tapped the magazine in her vest. Full. Hernandez. The voice cut through her comms headset, sharp and devoid of warmth. She looked across the bay. Lieutenant Axelrod was staring at her, his face a ghostly green illumination under the glow of the cockpit instruments. He wasn't wearing his goggles yet. He wanted her to see his eyes. Sir, Mia replied, keeping her voice flat. When we hit the dirt, you drop back, Axelrod said. He didn't shout, but the channel was open. The whole team heard it. I don't want you lagging in the stack. You're carrying an extra 20 pounds of useless glass and steel. You slow my assault element down, people die. I can keep pace, Lieutenant. I always do. You're a burden on the kinetic tempo, Hernandez. Axelrod snapped, cutting her off. Intel says this is a grab and go. We don't need a spectator looking through a straw from a mile away. But Command insisted on the gender-integrated support checkbox, so here you are. A few of the SEALs shifted uncomfortably. Others checked their weapons, feigning deafness. This wasn't just typical hazing. It was a vote of no confidence issued minutes before stepping into a war zone. I'll be in position to cover your movements, sir, Mia said, swallowing the anger that tasted like bile. She knew the stats. She knew her run times were faster than Bravo's heavy gunner. It wasn't about physics. It was about presence. Just stay out of the way, Axelrod muttered. Pilot, give me the green light. The Black Hawk flared hard, the G-force pushing Mia down into the canvas seat. The wheels kissed the rocky earth of the Yemeni highlands. Go, go, go. The team surged out like a single organism. Mia followed, dropping onto the shifting shale. The wind was howling here, carrying the biting chill of the high desert. As the helicopter lifted off, leaving them in a sudden ringing silence, the darkness swallowed the valley. Mia flipped her NVGs down. The world exploded into green phosphor. The terrain was a nightmare of jagged ridges and deep draws, perfect for an ambush, terrible for a rapid assault. Bravo 2, take point, Axelrod whispered over the radio. Hernandez, break off. Move to Ridgeline Charlie. It's 4 clicks east. You sit there and you watch the birds fly. Do not engage unless I clear it. You copy. Mia froze. Ridgeline Charlie was isolated. It was too far for mutual support. If she got into trouble, she was on her own. If they got into trouble, she'd be at the very limit of her effective range. Sir, Mia keyed her mic. Ridge Charlie puts me outside the support envelope. If I stay with the element until the valley floor, I gave you an order. Petty officer. Axelrod's voice was ice. You want to be an asset? Be an asset somewhere else. Move. The team began to move out, a silent snake winding down the hill. They didn't look back. Mia stood alone on the landing zone, the dust settling around her boots. The rejection was total. He wasn't just tactically separating her, he was discarding her. She gripped the pistol grip of her rifle, her knuckles white. A burden. The word echoed louder than the departing rotors. Solid copy, Bravo 1. Mia whispered, her tone stripping away all emotion. Moving to Ridge Charlie. Overwatch out. She turned away from the team, facing the towering black mass of the eastern ridge. It was a brutal climb, steep and unforgiving. She adjusted her pack, feeling the weight of the rifle, the ammo, the radio, the tools of her trade. She would make the climb. She would take the position. And when the time came, she prayed to a god she wasn't sure was listening, that Axelrod was right and that she wouldn't be needed. But as she took her first step into the dark, the hair on the back of her neck stood up. The valley was too quiet. The climb to Ridgeline Charlie was not a hike. It was a vertical brawl against gravity and geology. The Yemeni highlands were composed of loose shale and jagged basalt that tore at boots and skin alike. Mia Hernandez moved with the deliberate, agonizing slowness of a predator, forcing her breathing into a quiet rhythm, despite the fire in her lungs. Every step sent a cascade of small stones clattering into the darkness below, a sound that to her heightened senses roared like a landslide. She checked her wrist altimeter. She had ascended 400 meters in 12 minutes. Her kit weighed 60 pounds, but the psychological weight of Axelrod's dismissal felt heavier. A burden. The word was a spur in her side. She dug her gloved fingers into a crevice, hauling herself up the final ledge. She was in position. Mia wasted no time. She didn't collapse, she didn't rest. She slid into the prone position behind a cluster of scrub brush that offered natural concealment. The wind here was fierce, whipping her loose hair against her neck, biting and cold. She pulled the SR-25 from its drag bag, extending the bipod legs and settling the stock into the pocket of her shoulder. Next came the Kestrel wind meter. She mounted it low to the ground. Wind 14 miles per hour, gusting to 18. Direction 9 o'clock, full value. It was a nightmare wind for a long-range shooter, unpredictable and swirling through the canyons. Bravo 1, this is Overwatch, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. In position. Sector North is clear. How do you copy? Static. She frowned, adjusting the squelch on her radio. Bravo 1 Overwatch. Radio check. Nothing but the white noise of the atmosphere. The iron-rich mineral deposits in these mountains were acting like a Faraday cage, eating the signal. She was effectively deaf, and if she couldn't talk to them, she couldn't warn them. Mia shifted her attention to the spotting scope, switching to thermal imaging. The valley floor below was a monochromatic landscape of cool grays. The target compound, a cluster of mud brick structures identified by Intel as a dormant storage depot, sat silent in the center of the kill box. Come on, she muttered, scanning the perimeter. Show me something. According to the briefing, the village was inhabited only by a few goat herders and women. Non-combatants. The arms dealer was supposed to be meeting a courier in the main building unprotected. A soft knock operation, but the thermal image told a different story. On the roof of the northernmost building, a blotch of white-hot heat bloomed against the cool stone. It wasn't a chimney, it was biological, a human shape. Mia zoomed in her eye, straining against the digital grain. The figure was prone, unmoving. Next to it was a long, thin heat signature radiating warmth, a barrel that had been fired recently or was being kept warm. Sniper, she whispered, the blood draining from her face. She panned left. In the alleyway that Intel had marked as the primary infiltration route, 3 more heat signatures were huddled behind a wall. They weren't sleeping. They were crouching, waiting. One of them held a shape that was unmistakably an RPG launcher, the conical warhead glowing faintly cooler than the operator's body. This wasn't a meeting. It was a kill zone. The enemy knew Bravo was coming. They had set the table and were waiting for the guests to arrive. Mia keyed her radio again, desperation creeping into her discipline. Axelrod Bravo 1. It's a trap ambush set on the north axis, break off. Do not enter the funnel. The static hissed back at her, mocking and indifferent. She looked through her rifle scope, calculating the distance. 1,200 meters, a mile of dead air between her and her team. She saw the infrared strobes of the SEALs, tiny pulsing ghosts, moving steadily toward the compound. They were walking confident and fast aggressive, just as Axelrod liked. They were 5 minutes from the breach point, 5 minutes from annihilation. Mia's hand hovered over her bolt. The rules of engagement were clear: do not fire unless fired upon, or positive identification. PID of a hostile act is established. She had PID on the weapons, but she had no comms to authorize the shot. If she fired now unprompted, she would ruin the element of surprise. If she was wrong, if those were just local militia protecting their homes from rivals, she would be court-martialed for initiating a firefight. But the silence in her earpiece was deafening. She watched the thermal ghosts of her teammates inch closer to the RPG team lying in wait. "Turn around," she begged the silent radio. "Please just turn around." "What to do?" The lead SEAL, likely Axelrod, raised a fist. The team stopped. For a second, Mia thought he had sensed it. Maybe he had heard the whisper of intuition. Then the fist chopped forward. "Move!" Bravo team stepped into the fatal funnel, and Mia was the only person on Earth who knew they were already dead men walking. Through the lens of the SR-25, the violence began in silence. Mia watched the stack of 6 SEALs press against the weathered wood of the compound's main gate. They moved with the fluid, aggressive grace of apex predators, unaware they were stepping into a cage. From her perch 1,200 meters away, the action unfolded like a gruesome, silent film. She saw the lead breacher attach the explosive strip to the hinges. She saw the detonation, a sudden flare of white heat on her thermal display, followed seconds later by the delayed thump reaching her ears. Then the world turned inside out. As the SEALs flooded the courtyard, the sleeping village woke up. The heat signatures Mia had spotted on the rooftops didn't flee, they stood up. From the northern roof, a streak of superheated propellant slashed downward. The RPG warhead impacted the center of the courtyard, right where the rear guard of Bravo team was pivoting. The explosion was a blinding blossom of energy that washed out Mia's night vision for a split second. "Contact, front R, PG." The radio finally tore through the static, carried on the wave of kinetic energy. It wasn't the disciplined chatter of a Tier 1 unit anymore. It was a cacophony of shouting and the distinctive rapid-fire crack, crack, crack of suppressed carbines returning fire. "Ambush! We are taking effective fire from the high ground." It was Axelrod. His voice was pitched an octave higher than Mia had ever heard it. "Bravo 3 is down, I repeat. 3 is down, heavy bleeding." Mia's hands trembled not from fear for herself, but from the impotence of her position. Through the scope, she saw the trap snap shut. The enemy fighters in the alleyway, the ones she had tried to warn them about, opened up with belt-fed machine guns. The tracer rounds looked like angry hornets swarming the pinned SEALs. Bravo team dived for cover behind a low retaining wall and the burning carcass of a sedan. They were trapped in a classic L-shaped ambush. The enemy had crossfire on them from the front and the flank. "Pull back!" Axelrod screamed over the net. "Rally at the breach point. Smoke out." "Negative, boss. We can't move." 3, he's exposed." Mia adjusted her magnification. She could see the wounded man Bravo. 3 Petty Officer Miller lying in the open dirt, his thermal signature pooling ominously around him. 2 other SEALs were trying to drag him, but the machine gun fire was chewing up the ground inches from their heads. They were pinned. Then the tactical situation went from bad to catastrophic. A secondary explosion rocked the alleyway they had just entered from. The insurgents triggered an IED buried in the archway, collapsing the stone structure. A massive cloud of dust billowed into the night air. "They blew the exit," someone shouted. "We are cut off. 6 o'clock is blocked." Mia stared horrified. It was a kill box. A perfect, inescapable kill box. The enemy didn't want to drive them off. They wanted to exterminate them. The dust cloud from the collapsed archway obscured her view of the team, turning her thermal image into a useless gray fog. She couldn't shoot what she couldn't see. Overwatch! Axelrod's voice broke through the chaos, desperate and raw. Hernandez! Do you read me? We are pinned. We have zero cover. Where the hell are you? The arrogance was gone. The disdain for her burden was gone. All that remained was the terrifying clarity of a commander realizing he had led his men to their deaths. Mia keyed her mic, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Solid copy, Bravo 1. I have eyes on the rooftop shooters, but the dust is masking your position. I cannot support without risking friendly fire. If you don't do something, there won't be any friendlies left to hit. Axelrod yelled, the sound of bullets impacting concrete ringing in the background. Mia panned her rifle, searching for a target, any target she could engage safely. She scanned past the immediate firefight, looking deeper into the enemy's rear lines. That's when she saw it. On a flat roof about 400 meters behind the ambush line, 3 figures were frantically setting up a tripod. A long tube was being adjusted. Boxes of ammunition were being stacked. Mortars. If that tube fired, the first round would drop directly into the open courtyard where Bravo team was huddled. It wouldn't be a firefight anymore. It would be a butchery. Bravo 1, Mia said, her finger resting on the trigger guard. Stand by. The situation is about to get worse. Mia settled the crosshairs on the rooftop where the mortar team was frantically adjusting the elevation screw on the bipod legs. Through the high-definition thermal of her scope, the scene was crystal clear, a terrifying tableau of calculated cruelty. There were 3 insurgents manning the tube, but they weren't alone. Crowded around the weapon system, forced to kneel in a tight circle, were 6 other heat signatures. Smaller frames, softer outlines, women and children. The enemy had dragged families up to the roof, creating a living wall of flesh between their weapon and American retribution. Overwatch status. Axelrod's voice was a ragged shriek. We are taking heavy machine gun fire. We can't suppress them. I have eyes on a mortar team. Grid 44, Alpha. Mia replied, her voice eerily calm as her brain processed the geometry of the shot. They are dialing in on your position. Drop them now. Hernandez. Negative. I cannot engage. Mia said, her finger hovering off the trigger. They have human shields. Multiple packs, women and children, danger close to the tube. I do not have a clean shot. Damn it, Mia! Axelrod broke protocol using her first name in his panic. If that tube fires, we are all dead. The ROE allows for self-defense of the unit. Take the shot. Mia's stomach twisted. He was citing the self-defense clause, but she knew the JAG lawyers back in Washington would cite the proportionality and distinction clauses. If she pulled the trigger and a 7.62 millimeter round passed through an insurgent and killed a child, or if the falling mortar tube crushed a woman, she would be branded a war criminal. The video feed from her scope was likely being recorded somewhere. There would be no hiding the truth. But down in the courtyard, the truth was much simpler. Her team was about to die. Thump. A small plume of heat erupted from the mortar tube. The first round was airborne. Mia held her breath, counting the seconds of flight time. 1, 2, 3. Boom. The explosion rocked the courtyard below. It was a ranging shot, landing 20 meters short of the burning sedan where Bravo team was taking cover. Debris and shrapnel rattled against the metal of the car. The seals were so suppressed they couldn't even move to avoid the next one. Adjusting fire! Axelrod screamed. Next one is on our heads! Hernandez! Mia watched the insurgents on the roof. One of them was turning the hand crank, raising the barrel angle. They were walking the fire in. They needed maybe 10 seconds to reload and fire for effect. Mia looked at the children on the roof. She saw the terrifying clarity of their huddled forms. She couldn't do it. She could not put a bullet through that mass of humanity. But I can't let them die. Her eyes darted frantically around the rooftop structure. It was an old building, mud brick and timber, typical of the region. The mortar was set up near the edge of the roof, right next to a crumbling parapet wall that looked like it had been weakened by years of erosion. Above the parapet, a heavy rusted water tank sat on a timber frame, leaning precariously. Calculus flooded her mind. Physics. Structural integrity. If she shot the gunner, the child next to him dies. If she shoots the tube, it might detonate the ammo, killing everyone on the roof. But the timber frame holding the water tank. It was a 6-inch wooden beam glowing faintly warm from the day's sun. It was the only thing keeping 500 gallons of water from crashing down onto the mortar position. "Overwatch firing," Mia announced. "Kill them," Axelrod yelled. "I'm not aiming at them," she whispered to herself. She shifted her aim. The crosshair moved away from the insurgent's head, away from the crying woman, and settled on the dry, splintered wood of the support beam. It was a precision shot, far harder than hitting a man-sized target. At this distance, the beam was thinner than a hair. The wind gusted, 14 miles per hour. She held left. She controlled her breathing. The space between heartbeats stretched into an eternity. She wasn't a burden. She was the only thing standing between life and death. Mia squeezed. The rifle bucked into her shoulder, the suppressed crack lost in the vastness of the valley. She didn't blink. She stayed on the glass to watch the flight of the bullet. For a second, nothing happened. Then the timber support shattered. The heavy steel water tank groaned, tilted, and then surrendered to gravity. It crashed down with tremendous force, not onto the people, but directly onto the mortar tube and the ammo crates stacked beside it. The impact smashed the weapon system flat, crushing the tube against the concrete roof. The water tank burst open, sending a deluge of water washing over the insurgents and the civilians alike. The roof floor, weakened by the impact, gave way under the specific weight of the tank and the weapon collapsing inward. The mortar team fell into the room below. The civilians, huddled near the edge, scrambled back, wet and terrified but alive. The weapon was gone. "Target neutralized," Mia reported, exhaling a breath that felt like it had been held for hours. "Mortar is down. Structure collapsed." "Good copy." Axelrod sounded stunned, breathless. "Good copy, Overwatch. We are moving. Cover us." Mia cycled the bolt, ejecting the spent casing. It spun in the air, hot and brassy, before landing in the dirt. She had saved them. She had saved the civilians. But as she scanned the village again, she saw a flicker of movement in a window tower to the east, a lens glinting in the moonlight. She had revealed her position. The muzzle flash, however small, or the trajectory of the impact, had been traced. The enemy knew where the Angel of Death was hiding, and they were turning their heads to look up at Ridgeline Charlie. The dust from the collapsed water tower was still settling in the valley when the radio crackled again. "Overwatch, this is Bravo 1. Good effect on target. We are moving to the secondary breach point. Give us cover." Mia didn't answer immediately. Her eye was glued to the scope, scanning the dark windows of the eastern tower where she had seen the glint. It was a sniper's axiom. Once you fire, you are naked. The suppression of the mortar team was a miracle shot, but miracles didn't happen twice. She had traded her anonymity for their survival. "Copy Bravo 1, she whispered, her voice tight. "Be advised, I have a possible counter-sniper in the east tower. Move fast." Down in the kill box, the SEALs broke cover. They moved in bounding pairs, using the chaos of the collapsed roof to gain ground. But the enemy was adaptable. As soon as the SEALs exposed themselves, a heavy machine gun, PKM, opened up from a fortified bunker on the ground floor of the main building. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Green tracers chewed up the dirt around Axelrod's feet, forcing the team back behind the burning sedan. They were pinned again. "Damn it!" Axelrod yelled. "Hernandez! That PKM is eating us alive! Shut him up!" Mia shifted her aim. The PKM gunner was dug in deep behind sandbags. Only his head and the weapon were visible. It was a small target at 1,000 meters. But the real problem wasn't the difficulty of the shot. It was the east tower. Through her peripheral vision, Mia saw the thermal signature in the tower shift. The enemy sniper was searching. He knew the shot had come from the ridges. He was scanning for the muzzle flash, for the disturbance in the vegetation. If she fired now the muzzle blast from her unsuppressed SR-25, the suppressor, heated up too fast for rapid fire, would kick up dust. It would be a beacon. Calculated risk. She looked at the ballistic calculator strapped to her wrist. Elevation 11.4 mils. Windage left 1.2 mils. The wind was dying down, which meant the heat waves, the mirage, were boiling straight up, distorting the image like looking through running water. If I take this shot, she muttered, he sees me. Hernandez. Axelrod's voice was desperate. Miller is bleeding out. We need to move now. Mia closed her eyes for a microsecond. The faces of the men who had called her a burden flashed in her mind. They were helpless without her. If she stayed silent, she survived and they died. If she fired, she likely died and they might live. It wasn't a choice. It was the job. She exhaled, emptying her lungs to stabilize the reticle. She ignored the east tower. She focused entirely on the PKM gunner. Sending, she whispered. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled, slamming into her bruised shoulder. The 7.62 millimeter match-grade bullet screamed across the valley. 1.4 seconds of flight time. In the scope, she saw the PKM gunner's head snap back. The machine gun fell silent. Target down, she reported. Move now! Bravo team surged forward, crossing the gap to safety. Crack thump. The sound arrived an instant after the rock next to Mia's face exploded. Shards of granite sprayed into her cheek, drawing blood. The sonic crack of a high-velocity round passing inches from her ear was deafening. She rolled right, scrambling away from her shooting mat heart, hammering against her ribs. The enemy sniper in the east tower had found her. He hadn't missed by much, maybe 6 inches. He had waited for her flash, just as she predicted. Overwatch taking fire. Mia gasped into the radio, pressing her face into the dirt and shale. Position compromised. I am engaged. RE. Copy Overwatch. Axelrod replied, his voice breathless as he ran. We are clear of the kill zone. Break contact and get out of there. Negative, Mia said, wiping blood from her cheek. She peered over the rock. The PKM was down, but she saw movement. Another gunner was trying to man the weapon. If they got that gun up again, they would catch Bravo team in the open desert beyond the village. She couldn't break contact. She was the magnet now. As long as the enemy sniper was shooting at her, he wasn't shooting at the team. And as long as she held this ridge, she could keep the machine guns down. She dragged her rifle back into position, not to the same spot, but to a secondary loop she had cleared earlier. I'm not leaving, she whispered to the empty mountain. She dialed her magnification back. The duel had begun. The rock in front of Mia was disintegrating. Another round slammed into the basalt formation, showering her with razor-sharp fragments. This wasn't suppressive fire, it was precision work. The sniper in the east tower had her range dialed to the millimeter. He wasn't shooting to scare her. He was shooting to kill her the moment she offered a profile. Mia pressed her body into the dirt, her chest heaving against the hard earth. She checked her thermal optic, holding it up slightly without exposing her head. A second streak of heat zipped past the lens. 2. There were 2 of them. Bravo, 1 be advised. Mia gasped, the taste of limestone dust coating her tongue. I have 2 enemy marksmen suppressing my position. I cannot provide effective cover until I clear this threat. Copy Overwatch. Axelrod replied, his voice strained with physical exertion. We are moving to the extract point. Don't take unnecessary risks, Hernandez. If you can't shoot, stay down. Stay down. That was the safe play. If she stayed down, the snipers would keep watching her rock, waiting. But if she stayed down, the machine gun crew she had silenced earlier would be replaced. The enemy would reorganize. Bravo team was exposed in the open desert for another 400 meters. They're looking for a helmet, Mia whispered to herself. She reached up and unbuckled her chin strap. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were deliberate. She slid the ballistic helmet off her head. It felt dangerously light in her hands. Without it, she was vulnerable to even a glancing blow, but she needed a prop. She grabbed a dead branch of sagebrush and wedged it into the helmet's liner. Breathe, relax, focus. The wind had shifted again, coming from the left now. Mia lay on her back holding the stick. She positioned herself so she could roll out to her right, the unexpected side. She slowly raised the helmet above the rock on her left, mimicking the movement of a shooter trying to peek. Crack. The helmet jerked violently in her hand as a bullet tore through the Kevlar. Gotcha. The shot had come from the east tower. The muzzle flash would be cooling, but the barrel would still be hot. Mia didn't hesitate. She dropped the helmet and rolled right, bringing her SR-25 up. She didn't look for a person. She looked for the heat bloom. There. 4th window. A fading red blossom on the thermal sensor. She didn't wait for him to cycle his bolt. She exhaled and squeezed. The rifle jumped. Through the scope, she saw the heat signature in the window crumple backward, disappearing from view. "One down," she gritted out. Thwack! Pain exploded in her left shoulder. It felt like being hit by a sledgehammer. The second sniper, the one on the lower ridge she hadn't located yet, had fired the moment she exposed herself. He missed her heart by inches, the round impacting the edge of her body armor plate and sending a shard of copper jacket and ceramic spall slicing into her deltoid. Mia screamed a guttural sound that was lost in the wind. She scrambled back behind cover, her left arm going numb. She looked down. Blood was already dark and slick on her sleeve. "Hernandez status." Axelrod's voice was in her ear, tinny and distant. "I'm hit," Mia gasped, fumbling for her tourniquet with her good hand. "Sniper. Secondary position. High right." How bad? Functional, she lied. It wasn't functional. Her left arm was useless. She couldn't stabilize the rifle forend properly anymore. She tightened the tourniquet with her teeth, tears stinging her eyes from the blinding pain. She was wounded alone, and the second sniper was still out there, waiting for her to bleed out or make a mistake. She dragged herself back to the scope, using a rock to support the rifle's weight since her left arm wouldn't cooperate. She scanned the valley floor. Bravo team was moving. They were nearing the extraction point, a flat plateau 2 kilometers away. But as she watched them run, her heart sank. The enemy wasn't chasing them anymore. They were herding them. To the south of the extraction point, a convoy of headlights was moving fast, cutting across the desert floor. Technicals, pickup trucks with heavy weapons mounted on the back. They were racing to cut off the SEALs before the helicopter could land. "Bravo 1, Mia said, her voice weak but steady. "You have vehicles closing from the south. You are running into a blocking force." "We can't stop," Axelrod yelled. "We're out of ammo. We need that bird." Mia looked at her shoulder, then at the rifle. She had one mag left. She had one good arm, and she was the only thing standing between Bravo and a massacre. The pain in Mia's shoulder was a living thing now, a rhythmic throb that synced with her heartbeat, threatening to pull a veil of darkness over her vision. She bit down on her tongue, using the sharp sting to anchor herself in reality. Through the scope, the situation below was unraveling with terrifying speed. To the south, the convoy of enemy technicals, Toyota pickups with DSK heavy machine guns mounted in the beds, was kicking up a massive dust trail. They were driving parallel to Bravo team, racing to cut off the pass that led to the extraction zone. Bravo team, burdened by the weight of Petty Officer Miller's stretcher, was moving too slowly. They were heading straight for the intersection where the vehicles would ambush them. "Bravo 1, break right, Mia screamed into her headset. "You are walking into a blocking force. Head for the Wadi static, a wall of white noise." She checked the radio display. Jammed. The enemy had likely activated a localized jammer, or the sheer density of the mineral-rich canyon walls was finally killing the signal for good. "Can you hear me, Axelrod?" "Nothing." Down in the valley, Axelrod kept leading the team straight ahead, directly into the path of the oncoming guns. He couldn't see the vehicles behind the ridgeline. He didn't know he was running a race he had already lost. Mia looked at the convoy. They were 2 minutes from the kill zone. Bravo was 2 minutes from the kill zone. She couldn't call them. She couldn't signal them with a flare. It would give away her position to the second sniper, who was still hunting her. She looked at her magazine. 7 rounds. She had to herd them, like sheep. Mia adjusted her position, wincing as fresh blood soaked her shirt. She rested the barrel of the SR-25 on the rock. She couldn't shoot the enemy. They were too far, moving too fast, and protected by the vehicle cabs. She had to shoot her friends. "Forgive me," she whispered. She aimed 10 meters in front of Axelrod's lead element. She accounted for the drop. She accounted for the wind. Crack. The bullet impacted the dirt directly in front of Axelrod's boots, kicking up a geyser of dust. The lieutenant froze, dropping to a knee. The whole team scattered, assuming they were taking fire from the front. "No, don't stop!" Mia hissed. "Turn!" Axelrod looked around, confused. He started to wave the team forward again, thinking it was a stray round. Mia fired again. Crack. This time she put the round 5 meters to his left. Axelrod flinched away from the impact. He looked up at the ridgeline. He couldn't see her, but he looked toward the mountain. "Turn right," she begged. "Go to the Wadi." She fired a third shot, then a fourth, stitching a line of dust in the ground that blocked their path forward, angling sharply to the right toward the dry riverbed, the wadi that offered cover from the vehicles. Axelrod paused. He looked at the dust puffs. He looked at the terrain. It wasn't random fire. It was a barrier. He seemed to realize it. He grabbed the shoulder of the man next to him and pointed frantically toward the wadi. They're turning. Bravo team shifted direction, sprinting hard toward the depression in the earth. Seconds later, the enemy technicals roared over the ridge, their heavy machine guns tearing apart the exact spot where Bravo had been standing moments ago. The air was filled with the thunder of 12.7mm rounds decimating the scrub brush. But the SEALs were gone. They had slipped into the wadi shielded by the earth banks, moving invisible and fast toward the LZ. Mia watched them disappear into safety. A wave of relief washed over her, so powerful it almost made her pass out. She had done it. The burden had carried them. She tracked the enemy vehicles. They were stopping confused. The gunners were scanning the valley, looking for the prey that had vanished. Then the second sniper, the one she had forgotten in her focus on the team, reminded her of his presence. Spang. A bullet struck the receiver of her rifle, shattering the scope mount and sending metal fragments into her face. The impact knocked the weapon from her hands. Mia rolled onto her back, gasping, her vision swimming. Her primary weapon was dead. Her scope was gone. She reached for her belt. She had her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, and one magazine. She checked her rifle mag. Empty. The bolt was locked back. Winchester. She whispered the code for out of ammo to the empty air. She was bleeding. She was disarmed of her long-range capability. And the enemy ground forces, realizing the SEALs had escaped, were now turning their eyes and their guns up toward the ridge. They knew someone was up there. They were coming to finish the job. The sound of the inbound Black Hawk was a low, thrumming vibration in the ground before it became a noise in the air. Mia pushed herself up to a kneeling position, fighting the black spots dancing in her vision. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, a dead weight of throbbing agony. Her SR-25 lay broken in the dirt, a twisted piece of expensive metal. She looked down into the valley. The enemy technicals had stopped searching the wadi. They heard the helicopter too. Their turrets were traversing barrels, lifting toward the sky, searching for the dark silhouette of the rescue bird against the stars. If they spotted the Black Hawk on approach, they would shred it. A slow-moving helicopter during landing was a flying coffin. Bravo team was nearly at the extraction point, a flat stretch of hard-packed earth a kilometer to the north. But they were still exposed. If the technicals turned north, they would catch the SEALs just as they were boarding. They need time. Mia rasped, her throat dry as sandpaper. They need eyes off the bird. She fumbled with the pouch on her vest, her fingers slick with her own blood. She pulled out a pen flare launcher. It was designed for emergency signaling, a desperate cry for help. Tonight it was a dinner bell. She looked at the ridgeline behind her. If she fired the flare directly above her position, every gun in the valley would turn toward Ridge Charlie. The snipers, the technicals, the foot soldiers, they would all look at the light. And in that moment of distraction, the Black Hawk could slip in low and fast. It was suicide. She knew it. Burden, she whispered, testing the word one last time. It didn't sting anymore. It felt like a challenge she had finally answered. Mia stood up. She didn't crouch. She didn't hide. She stood fully upright on the skyline, a silhouette against the moon. She raised the flare launcher, pointing it not up but slightly behind her to draw their eyes even further away from the team. Pop. Hiss. A brilliant red sphere streaked into the night sky, burning with the intensity of a dying star. It bathed the ridge in a crimson glow, illuminating Mia like a statue of defiance. "Here I am," she screamed, though they couldn't hear her. "Come and get me." The effect was instantaneous. The heavy machine guns on the technicals swung violently away from the northern valley floor. The tracer fire that had been searching for the helicopter shifted, converging on the red light burning above Ridge Charlie. Crack, 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 boom. The mountain around her erupted. Rocks shattered. Dust plumes exploded into the air. Mia threw herself back behind the crest of the ridge, just as the air where she had been standing was filled with lead. "Bravo 1 to Overwatch, we see the flare." Axelrod's voice burst through the radio, suddenly clear as the jamming signal was likely repositioned or blocked by terrain. Hernandez, what the hell are you doing? That's nowhere near the LZD. Mia drew her 9mm Sig Sauer. She checked the chamber. 1 in the pipe. 15 in the magazine. She heard shouting below her. Footsteps scrambling up the shale. The enemy infantry was coming up the slope. They weren't shooting from a distance anymore. They were coming to take the trophy. Go, Mia whispered into the radio. Just go. Hernandez popped smoke at the LZ. We are at the extraction point. Where are you? The Black Hawk roared into the valley, coming in low under the cover of darkness, masking its approach behind the noise of the guns firing at Mia. I'm not coming, sir, Mia said, her voice eerily calm amidst the chaos of incoming fire. I'm holding the door. Get to the chopper, that is an order. Negative, too many of them. If I move, they look at you. Mia peered over the rock. She saw the first turbaned head crest the ridge 50 meters away. She leveled her pistol. Get the boys home, Axe! She fired. The figure dropped. Hernandez! Mia didn't answer. She fired again. And again. The red flare sputtered and died, plunging the ridge back into darkness. But the muzzle flashes of her pistol were the only light she needed now. She wasn't a sniper anymore. She was a cornered animal, and she was going to make them pay for every inch of ground. Down in the valley, the Black Hawk touched down. The SEALs were scrambling aboard. But on the ridge, the war was just getting personal. The interior of the Black Hawk was a chaotic storm of shouting men and checking gear. The rotor wash battered the desert floor, creating a brownout that obscured the world outside the open doors. Head count! Axelrod screamed, grabbing the nearest operator by the vest. Sound off! 1 up, 2 up, 3 up! The count rippled through the cabin, fast and frantic. The wounded man Miller was being strapped to the floor deck, a medic already working on his leg. 5 up, 6 up. Silence. Axelrod stared at the empty space near the door gunner. There was no 7. There was no sniper rifle case. There was no Mia. He keyed his internal comms, switching to the pilot's frequency. Hold lift. We are -1. Hold lift. Negative Bravo. 1. The pilot's voice was tense, bordering on panic. We are taking small arms fire. We are heavy and we are burning gas. I have to lift now, or we don't clear the ridge. Axelrod looked out the door. High up on Ridge Charlie, a solitary strobe of muzzle flashes was flickering in the dark. It was a pistol, a single 9mm pistol fighting against a wave of automatic rifle fire. The enemy tracers were converging on that one point like vultures circling a dying animal. She wasn't just holding the door. She was locking it from the outside. She's still up there. Axelrod realized the bile rising in his throat. He remembered his words. You're a burden, a liability. That liability was currently drawing every bullet in the valley so his elite unit could fly home safe. Set it down, Axelrod roared. I said, set it down. Sir, we cannot wait. We are leaving, the pilot shouted, pulling on the collective. The wheels began to leave the earth. Axelrod didn't argue. He didn't check with command. He unclipped his safety lanyard. Cover me, he yelled to his team. Boss, what are you doing? The chief shouted. Axelrod jumped. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact as the helicopter hovered uncertainly 10 feet above him. He didn't look back. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted toward the slope of Ridge Charlie. Door gunner, clear a path. Axelrod screamed into his radio. Suppress the ridge, danger close. The starboard door gunner didn't hesitate. The M1-34 minigun spun up with an electric whine before unleashing a stream of fire that sounded like canvas ripping. A solid red laser of tracer rounds sawed through the darkness, impacting the crest of the ridge just above where Axelrod was climbing. Up on the ridge, Mia was fading. Her pistol clicked empty. The slide locked back. She didn't have the strength to reload. Her vision was tunneling down to a pinprick of light. Shadows were moving toward her men with AK-47s shouting in triumph. They knew she was out. They were coming to take her alive. She let the pistol drop from her numb fingers. She tried to reach for her knife, but her arm wouldn't obey. I did it, she thought, closing her eyes. I carried the weight. Then the world exploded. The minigun fire raked the enemy positions just meters from her feet, turning rocks and men into mist. The ground shook violently. Through the dust and the deafening roar, a shape emerged. Not an enemy. Axelrod vaulted over the ledge, his carbine raised. He fired 2 controlled bursts, dropping the closest insurgents who were recovering from the airstrike. He slid to his knees beside her, grabbing her vest. "Hernandez!" He yelled, his face inches from hers. He looked terrified. Mia blinked, trying to focus. "Sir, you left. We don't leave our own." Axelrod grunted, holstering his weapon and grabbing the drag handle on the back of her plate carrier. "Hold on!" He didn't wait for her to answer. He hauled her up his boots, digging into the loose shale. He dragged her down the slope, half carrying, half sliding, as the minigun continued to churn the earth above them, keeping the enemy heads down. The run back to the bird was a blur of noise and exertion. Axelrod was screaming, his lungs burning, pulling her dead weight across the sand. "Get them in! Get them in!" The crew chief was bellowing from the door. Hands reached out from the helicopter's strong, gloved hands. They grabbed Mia by the belt and the vest, yanking her into the cabin like a sack of grain. Axelrod dived in after her just as the pilot hammered the throttle. The Black Hawk lurched into the air, banking hard to the left. Bullets pinged off the fuselage, but they were moving too fast now. They were out. Axelrod collapsed on the metal floor, gasping for air. He crawled over to where the medic was cutting open Mia's sleeve. "Status," Axelrod demanded. The medic looked up, his face grim under the red tactical light. Blood was pooling on the deck plates, dark and thick. "She's shocky, sir. BP is dropping fast. I can't stop the bleeding here. She's got shrapnel in the subclavian artery." Axelrod looked at Mia. Her skin was the color of ash. Her eyes were open, but they were glassy, staring at the ceiling of the fuselage. Her chest was barely moving. "Mia!" Axelrod said, his voice trembling. He grabbed her uninjured hand. It was cold. "Stay with me. You hear me? That's an order. Stay with me." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The sniper who had saved them all, the woman he had called a burden, let out a long, shuddering exhale. And then she stopped breathing. The world came back in a wash of sterile white and the rhythmic, annoying beep of machinery. Mia Hernandez blinked her eyelids, feeling like sandpaper. The smell of antiseptic replaced the copper tang of blood and the sulfur of gunpowder. She tried to move her left arm, but it was immobilized, wrapped heavily in bandages and strapped to her chest. A dull ache radiated from her shoulder, a permanent reminder of the high ground she had held. "Easy, Hernandez. You're at Landstuhl. You've been out for 2 days." She turned her head. Sitting in a plastic chair in the corner of the recovery room was Lieutenant Axelrod. He looked exhausted. He was still wearing his field uniform, though it had been washed. The shadows under his eyes told her he hadn't slept much. "The team," Mia rasped, her voice a broken whisper. "All present and accounted for," Axelrod said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Miller lost his leg below the knee, but he's alive. The rest of the guys are banged up but walking. Because of you." Mia closed her eyes, letting the relief wash over her. They were safe. "Don't get too comfortable." Axelrod's voice shifted, dropping into a lower, more serious register. "There's a JAG officer outside. Commander Sullivan. He's running the post-action inquiry." Mia's stomach tightened. She knew this was coming. The shot at the water tank, the proximity to the civilians, the ROE violation of firing without a direct line of sight on a combatant to induce a structural collapse. It was a career ender. Maybe prison. "He wants to know about the mortar pit," Axelrod continued. "He has the drone feed, but the angle was obscured by smoke. He's looking for the helmet cam footage to confirm you had positive identification and that the collateral damage assessment was within limits." Mia swallowed hard. "Sir, I took the shot to save the team, but the civilians were—" "I know where the civilians were, Mia." Axelrod stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small SD card. It was the storage chip from the mission recorder, the digital witness that saw everything, including the women and children standing inches from the impact zone of the falling water tank. He held it up to the fluorescent light. "Technically," Axelrod said, examining the plastic chip, "this footage shows a reckless endangerment of non-combatants. It shows you took a gamble that no manual allows. If this goes into the file, you're done. Dishonorable discharge." Mia stared at the card. It was the truth. "But," Axelrod said, his thumb brushing over the metal contacts, "technically the recorder malfunctioned during the extraction. Data corruption due to magnetic interference in the valley. Mia's eyes widened. Sir, Axelrod looked at her, his expression unreadable. I already gave my sworn statement. I testified that I authorized the shot. I testified that I confirmed the area was clear of non-combatants via my optics before giving you the green light. The collapse of the structure was a calculated secondary effect to neutralize the weapon system. He crushed the SD card in his fist, the plastic snapping with a sharp crack. He tossed the fragments into the medical waste bin next to her bed. There is no footage to contradict the ground commander's report, Axelrod said flatly. Mia stared at him. He had just perjured himself. He had put his own rank, his own trident on the line to cover for her. The man who had called her a burden, who had tried to leave her on the tarmac, had just rewritten history to save her career. Why? She whispered. Axelrod picked up his cover and placed it on his head. He didn't look at her with warmth or pity or affection. He looked at her with the cold, hard respect one warrior gives another. Because you were right, he said. We walked into a trap. I was arrogant. And you were the only one who did the job. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Get well, Petty Officer. Bravo team has training in 6 weeks. I expect you on the range. And fix your loadout. You're going to need more ammo next time. Yes, sir, Mia said, a faint smile touching her lips. Axelrod nodded once, a sharp, definitive gesture, and walked out. The door closed, leaving Mia alone with the hum of the monitors. She looked at the empty chair, then down at her bandaged arm. The pain was still there, but the weight, the heavy, crushing weight of needing to prove herself was gone. She wasn't a burden. She was a SEAL's shield. And for the first time in her career, she didn't need a thank you. The silence was enough.